What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at NerdTees, and welcome to Week 11, 1-1 of the 2022 CFL football season, and we're coming off of an okay week. Did manage to scrape together 7-5 overall in Week 10, and that was like 4-5 heading into the last game of the week, so I did end last week on the upswing, sweeping the last game of last week. So we're coming into this week with momentum. We did prove that we can have a winning week, a winning record while wearing a t-shirt. So we're going back to the well a second time to see if we can duplicate that result. 3-1 straight up and 3-1 against the spread last week. So I gave virtually everything back on the totals. I only went 1-3, but straight up and against the spread, the picks were on point. Now 29-10 straight up, 27-12 against the spread, and only one game over 500 on the totals at 20-19. So the totals, obviously, there's a lot of work that needs to be done there, and boy, it feels like over season, but every time I feel like I'm taking an over, it's the game that winds up under. So that's been a struggle this year, but we're going to see if we can't turn that around starting this week. CFL Fantasy, I had an okay week last week, 79.5 points. I always like to be closer to 100 than that, but it certainly wasn't like one of the bad 60 weeks that we've had. My MVP from last week, Saskatchewan quarterback Cody Fajardo, only had 130 passing yards, 1 touchdown and 1 pick, but added 51 yards on 8 carries with 2 rushing touchdowns. Good for 24.3 points. He was my MVP from week 10, now sitting at 824.6 points overall. I did not move in the standings. I still sit in 13th place in that league out of 48. The leader now has 935.2, which means I did lose significant ground to the leader in that league. They put up a 100-point performance, so I lost over 20 points to them, trailing first place by 110.6. However, I did pick up ground, getting towards the team that's in 10th place. Now only trail 10th by 3.5 points, so I congested that by almost 10 points just in last week. So right there, that meaty part of the standings, just outside the top 10, everybody's very, very close. And I also increased my lead on 20th place by about 3.5 points. So I'm feeling pretty comfortable where I'm at, and one good week is going to shoot me up these standings. Whether that comes in Week 11 or not, I'm not sure, because we are taking some gambles with our Week 11 lineup, which is right in front of your eyes right now, and the gamble starts right from the top. Ladies and gentlemen, my fantasy quarterback this week, Edmonton Elks quarterback Taylor Cornelius. Believe it or not, he's had some pretty, he's only really started, 4 games this year, I think. And I think he's averaging 16.5 points. So he's averaging double the value versus his cost. He only cost about $8,000 in the CFL fantasy game. So there's value to be found with most of Taylor Cornelius's performances. So we're going to do that, and we're going to insulate Cornelius with his top 2 receiving options. I've got Kenny Lawler at wide receiver and Darrell Walker in my flex position. I feel really good about their potential against the REDBLACKS this week. So we're going to stack Cornelius with Lawler and Walker. Right now, I've got AJ Ouellette in at running back. Now, there's some question mark about who will start for the Argos at running back, now that, of course, we're going to be without Andrew Harris for the foreseeable future. We got James Butler in there. He did not play last week, but he's not on the injury report right now, so we have to assume that he's going to be back at things starting this week. And we're going to grab Keon Hatcher there so that we have a piece of that vaunted BC Lions offense. So you folks are going to have to tell me right off the top how you feel about that Taylor Cornelius play at quarterback, but that's the way we're going to go with fantasy this week. And your Week 11 slate of games looks like this. The league-leading Winnipeg Blue Bombers on their first bye week of the season. Finally, 11 weeks into this thing, they're on their first bye. We've got the Edmonton Elks in Ottawa taking on the REDBLACKS. BC is in Saskatchewan to take on the Riders. Hamilton is in Montreal to take on the Alouettes. And Calgary is in Toronto to take on the Argos. We also might as well call this week the injury bug edition of the show because we're going to be talking about an awful lot of injury reports here. So if you're not interested in hearing stuff about injuries, this might not be the episode for you, but it's the direction that we're going to go. We're going to start with that Edmonton-Ottawa matchup, that game taking place in the nation's capital. Edmonton now 2-7 on the season, losers of 3 straight games coming into this one, losing last week 34-23 against Saskatchewan. That game was in Edmonton. The Elks still looking for their first win on home field this year. In terms of the X factors that I gave them last week, which was that receiving trio that they have at the top, Kenny Lawler, Darrell Walker, and Manny Arsenault combined for 10 catches for 156 yards receiving 18 of Taylor Cornelius's 23 passing targets. And look, there were a lot of positives that came out of that game for the Elks. Taylor Cornelius is a dangerous runner of the football. Like, I've been pretty critical of his abilities as a passing quarterback, but as somebody running the football, he's dangerous and he can make plays. 7 carries for 86 yards rushing. He was the leading rusher for the Elks in this game, and 2 rushing touchdowns. So Taylor Cornelius is a weapon and can put up some damage in the ground game. Kenny Lawler goes over 100 yards receiving for the first time since week 2, and the defense, they only allowed less than 300 yards. I think it was like 260 something. So a decent defensive performance. This really was anybody's game if you take away the Mario Alford kick return touchdown. Speaking of the defense, the Elks defense has allowed 104 points total in their last 3 games, far and away the worst record, the worst mark, I should say, of any team over their last 3. But yardage-wise, they've actually been okay. They gave up 261 to Saskatchewan last week. They gave up 540 to BC, but who isn't giving up 500 yards of offense to BC these days? And only gave up 274 to Winnipeg. There's things to like about the direction that the Edmonton Elks are going in, albeit going kind of slowly. The REDBLACKS are 1-7 on the season, losers last time out. They're coming into this game fresh off of their bye week. 2 weeks ago, they dropped a 14-point decision, 17-3, to the Calgary Stampeders. That game was in Ottawa. And based on the X factor, I said it was Jalen Acklin, the league's leading receiver, at least at the time. He was like their 4th option in this game. Just an awful quarterbacking game across the board for the REDBLACKS 2 weeks ago. Acklin had 7 targets. He only caught 3 of them and only brought in 28 yards receiving, his worst mark since week 4. Caleb Evans follows up what was inarguably his best game as a pro with what was a bench-worthy performance. I'm not even going to go into the numbers because they're just absolutely disgusting. So Nick Arbuckle comes into the game. He moves the ball a lot better than Caleb did, but he also throws 2 interceptions. Who's your starter? Who is your number 1 quarterback? Like, what was it, 3 weeks or a month ago, I said, look, they shouldn't snap call on a quarterback change. I think it sends a bad message to Caleb Evans if you let him have a game like that and then he starts again the next game. I think the message you have to send there is that that's not acceptable, and the way you do that is you send him to the bench. So I would expect Nick Arbuckle to probably start this game. It's also against his former team, so there's some revenge at play there. So I would expect it to be Nick Arbuckle, but either way, I really don't like the upside of this offense. Another big part of the reason why I'm not liking the upside of the offense is we are unlikely in this game to see William Powell. He's not practicing. He's dealing with a knee injury. We're not likely to see RJ Harris, who played a big part in that game 2 weeks ago. He's dealing with a hip injury. And we're also not likely to see Adam Auclair. He's their starting weak side linebacker. He's dealing with a hand injury. He's not practicing either. So there could be some significant pieces here on multiple levels that are missing for the REDBLACKS. Both of Edmonton's wins so far this season have come against the East Division and away from home, which is both conditions that they're playing under this week. The REDBLACKS have not won a game at home yet this year. They are winless against teams in the West. Am I being trapped here? Like, this feels like a trap situation. This feels like one of those things where everything is pointing in Edmonton's direction and they're going to get blown out by 25. That's what this feels like, but I think I got a bite on this. I'm going to take the Edmonton Elks in the upset here to go to Ottawa and get the win over the REDBLACKS. These are the 2 worst teams in the CFL as far as I'm concerned, so might as well grab the underdogs as a dog play. So let's take Edmonton on the road in Ottawa to get the win. On the line, Ottawa is favored by 4.5 points here as the home favorite. Obviously, I like Edmonton to win outright. I'm going to go ahead and take that plus 4.5. Total in the game set at 48.5 points. I think the last scoring play of this game just nudges it over this number. This feels like a very achievable number. Even though I don't love the offensive upside for one of the teams, the defenses on both sides are not overly great in terms of the scoring. I think this winds up going over just by a little bit. So let's go over 48.5 points in Edmonton, Ottawa. Let's go Elks 27, Redblacks 23. Let's go to Saskatchewan now, where the BC Lions are going to be in town. BC extending their record to 7-1, coming off of a single-point victory in Calgary, come from behind victory in Calgary, 41-40. I was on the under in that game. Good for me. This is the tail end of back-to-back road games here for the BC Lions, so that is definitely something to keep an eye on. But they are right back to as hot as they were at the beginning of the year. Winners of 4 straight games, and Nathan Rourke is a video game. It is official. Nathan Rourke is in and of himself a video game. 488 yards passing, 4 more total touchdowns for Nathan Rourke in the game last week. The kid's a monster, and he's only 24 years old. The Lions had 2 100-yard receivers in that game. Both of them had touchdown receptions as well from Nathan Rourke. All 6 BC Lions receivers, which included the running back that got the start for them last week, had at least 6 targets in the passing game. They all had at least 5 catches. They all had at least 35 receiving yards. So not only is Rourke a monster, but he spreads the ball out a ton. Everybody gets to eat in that offense, and it's just such a fun thing to watch. But the same as it's been for the last little bit, it's not just the offense that's getting the job done. It's tough to really praise the defense in a game where they gave up 40 points, but that secondary had key pass knockdowns, especially in the second half of that game, that limited Bo Levi Mitchell to just 206 yards passing, and that was a good way to compensate for a run game that really was not there, aside from, Nathan Rourke had 2 rushing touchdowns, and I think if he wasn't the team's leading rusher, he was right there. But as a team, they only ran 13 times for 45 yards. So without James Butler, the run game really was not there for BC. The Riders got off the schneid coming out of their bye week, now 5-4 on the season, picking up that 34-23 win aforementioned in Edmonton. And based on the X factor that I gave them from last week, which was rest, just the fact that they finally got to rest, I think that really worked out for them. And the one thing that I'm going to point to is Cody Fajardo with his feet. Cody Fajardo had 5 designed quarterback runs in that game, which is more than the 1 that he had prior to the bye week. So the fact that they built some designed quarterback runs in there for Cody Fajardo is an indication to me that that knee is in a lot better place than it was just a few weeks ago. The rest definitely helping out at the top of that Riders offense and defense, and they're only getting healthier. Now look, this game was far from perfect. Fajardo only completed 55% of his passes, which is not great against a secondary like Edmonton. You would have thought he would have a higher percentage than that, certainly. Only 130 yards passing, 1 passing touchdown. He also threw an interception in that game. I kind of felt like Saskatchewan was the second best offense on the field. I think in terms of the pass game, in terms of the run game, I think they were the second best offense in that game. And this was a 1-point game heading into the last 5 minutes of the game. This was very much anybody's game. But speaking of the rest and speaking of getting healthier, you look at guys that are starting to now return to practice. Shaq Evans, Paul Robertson, AC Leonard, a huge part of that defense. But now you got Charleston Hughes who isn't practicing. So as much as you're, taking steps forward, they might be looking at taking a pretty decent step back if Hughes is not available. I didn't see a ton last week that I didn't expect to see from Saskatchewan. They beat a team that they're supposed to beat. That is the one team in the West Division that Saskatchewan is supposed to beat every single time. So they did do that. I don't think Saskatchewan's all the way back yet, and BC is on absolute fire right now. So we're going to go ahead and take the Lions in this one on the road in Saskatchewan. It's tough to beat Saskatchewan twice in Mosaic. BC's already done it once this year, but I think they go in there and they do it again. So let's take the Lions over the Riders. Now on the line, Saskatchewan is taking 5 points here as the home dog. I kind of feel compelled almost to lay anything under a touchdown on the Lions because you're not really getting that number all that often. So I kind of feel compelled to lay it when I get it. So we're going to go ahead and lay the 5 points on the BC Lions. I'm not in love with that pick, but that's the way I'm going to go with this one. So we're going to lay -5 on BC. Total in the game's at 52.5 points. The teams are combining to average 58.5 per game over their last 3 games respectively. So we're going to go ahead and grab the over here. Over 52.5 points in BC Saskatchewan. Let's go Lions 34, Riders 23. And before we move to the back half of the week, I'm going to take this opportunity, as I always do, to shout out my great friends and sponsors at Nerd Tees. Ladies and gentlemen, nerdtees.ca is where you need to go to find dozens and dozens of incredible loose leaf tea blends and accessories, gifts for the whole family. And look, man, we're talking Christmas. Anybody that works in retail like I do, you're talking Christmas, you're thinking Christmas. It's going to be here before you know it. So nerdtees.ca is a great option for you and a great option to save you some money. That's my promo code, which is BWFinest. You're going to save yourself 15% at checkout. You're also going to get free shipping in Canada on any order over $100. And if you're one of my US viewers, you get a great conversion rate on the US dollar on great blends like today's blend, which is my all-time favorite, the watermelon oolong. Think the sweetest, most delicious watermelon anything that you've ever smelled. I guarantee you this smells better. Grab yourself a bag of watermelon oolong and you're going to find out for yourself. Nerdtees.ca, promo code BWFinest, save your 15%, get your free shipping, find yourself something to love, or find someone you love something to love. You can do it on nerdtees.ca, and they're just a couple of days from being back after their hiatus where they moved their physical location. Just a couple more days, and you'll be able to take advantage of everything that Nerd Tees has to offer. We come back out for the second half of the week, which leads us to Montreal, where the Hamilton Ticats are in town to take on the Alouettes. Hamilton beating Toronto, avenging their loss to Toronto from 2 weeks ago, moving their record to 3-6 on the season. A 34-27 win against Toronto. That game was in Hamilton, and Matt Shiltz getting the start over Dane Evans, who missed the game with a shoulder injury, still dealing with his shoulder a little bit. Shiltz guides the Braylon Addison-less Ticats to a big win last week. Addison looking like he's probably going to miss. Well, I think he ruptured his Achilles. So if he ruptured his Achilles, he's done until next year. And the Ticats flipped the script on what has been the dominant storyline on them the entire season, which is their inability to close out games, or their inability to even be competitive in the second half of football games. Look, they entered the half down 7 points. They trailed this game 21-14. They reeled off 17 points in the fourth quarter to come back and rip a victory from the jaws of defeat here. And shout out to Sean Thomas Erlington. I'm going to do this. Sean Thomas Erlington has one of my favorite names in the CFL, is just one of my favorite players in the CFL. I got a soft spot for STE himself, Sean Thomas Erlington, scoring his first rushing touchdown since week 14 of last season in that game last week. So shout out to Sean Thomas Erlington, and shout out for the Ticats, like, again, flipping the script on what has been the biggest detraction against them all season long. Now, here's where we really start talking about some injuries. The Ticats have a laundry list of did not participates in practice on Tuesday. That includes Simone Lawrence, Ciante Evans. Dane Evans is still not practicing. So we really got to watch the injury reports here as we get closer and closer to game time to see who's going to be in and who's going to be out. I would expect Matt Shiltz is probably going to get his second straight start. Now, the Alouettes, they also brought their record to 3-6 last week with the singular biggest upset of the 2022 CFL season, going into Winnipeg and stealing a 20-17 overtime win. I shouldn't say they stole it. They earned it, definitely. But to go into Winnipeg and beat the Bombers is the ultimate feather in the cap if you are a CFL team. Montreal went out and they did that. They slayed the ultimate dragon in this league, and that is Zach Collaros and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And there was no real special sauce that led to the win either. Like, they had good pressure. They had good pressure on the quarterback. They definitely won the game at the line of scrimmage. They had 5 quarterback sacks. Winnipeg only generated 1. So they did definitely win the game at the line of scrimmage. But other than that, it was just like a game where they hung with the Bombers. They just hung with the Bombers for the entirety of it, got the game to overtime. Literally anything can happen in overtime in the CFL. So that was exactly what happened, and Montreal got them, and big ups to them for doing it. I think Montreal has to face the possibility that maybe a quarterback change may be what's best for them moving forward. And I'm not talking about long-term quarterback change, but Trevor Harris is very clearly still dealing with his back injury. And I didn't even need to read the injury reports to know that. Look at his stats from the last 3 games. He's got 628 passing yards total over the last 3 games. So what's that? 219 yards per game. 209 yards per game, and 2 touchdowns and 2 picks. And that's it over his last 3. He's clearly still struggling with his back. He's not a threat to run the ball. At what point do you kind of slide Dominique Davis in there and say, look, we need you to have a little spot start here, maybe in front of a bye week or something. We're going to give Trevor 2 weeks to deal with his back and just not have to worry about it. Like, at what point do you kind of see them maybe sliding Double D, as he is known, as he's been affectionately come to be known in our circles? At what point do they slide Dominique Davis to start? I think this is probably the game this week with the least amount of certainty around who's actually going to be playing in it. So I'm going to go ahead and defer to my gut. My gut tells me Hamilton's going to win this game. The Ticats are 3-1 against teams in the East Division. Montreal, I think, is under 500 at 1-2. And I think Hamilton is too good to stay winless away from home this year. All of their wins have come at home in Hamilton. They're too good of a team to not win a game on the road. This feels like a pretty winnable football game for them, even with the injuries. I'm going to go ahead and grab the Ticats here. It's a marginal upset on the betting line. But we're going to go ahead and grab the Hamilton Ticats to win this game outright in Montreal. So, like I said, Montreal, kind of a marginal home favorite. They're laying -3. I like Hamilton +3. I would take this number either way. Even if I liked Montreal to win, I think these two teams are so similar that I would probably hedge and grab the +3, but I like Hamilton to win outright, so I'm happy to take the 3 points. Total in the game set at 48.5 points. I think this is the only game this week, spoilers, that does not go over the point total. I think this is a pretty darn perfect number, and were it not for the injuries, I'd probably slide over on this one. But we're going to stay under, considering the injuries, under 48.5 points in Hamilton, Montreal. Let's go Ticats 23, Alouettes 17. And the final game of the week sees the Calgary Stampeders on the road in Toronto to take on the Argos. Calgary's record dropping to 5-3 off of the game last week, which is that single-point loss against BC. That game was in Calgary, and Calgary blows a 30-18 lead from halftime and allow 20 points in the fourth quarter. Not very Calgary Stampeders-like, and a lot of this game was not very Calgary Stampeders-like. And the first person to tell you that would be the Calgary Stampeders. To me, the smoking gun in this game was the lack of faith in the run game. I can understand with Kadeem Carey not playing. I get it if you don't have the same kind of faith in your run game. That I totally understand. Kadeem's probably the best running back in football. However, it's inexcusable to me in a game against a team that's arguably better than you to not run the football more than Calgary ran the football, especially in a game where you had a lead. You had a lead of multiple possessions, in fact. At that point, you should be pounding the football down the other guy's throats. That's game management. That's how you win football games. Calgary didn't do that, and especially in a game where Bo Levi-Mitchell was not very good. You have to focus on running the football. Mills had 7 carries for 55 yards. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Dedrick Mills had a decent game. As a matter of fact, that's almost 8 yards a carry. So it's shocking to me that he only got 7 carries of the football. And as a team, they only carried the ball 11 times. So I'm going to say this to the Calgary Stampeders because they're the quality of franchise that they can hear this and understand that it's not mean-spirited in any way. I said it right from the top of this season. The Calgary Stampeders are the New England Patriots of the CFL. It is inexcusable in that situation to run the ball 11 times, especially when you have a back that is averaging nearly 8 yards per carry. I have no idea why you would think that that would be the pathway to winning that football game with Nathan Rourke on the other side. with the best offense in the league on the other side. You're going to let them possess the ball for 35 minutes because you refuse to run the ball? Now, taking an eye to Calgary's injury report right now, Kadeem did return to practice, but in a very limited capacity, so he's very much still up in the air about whether he's going to play or not. Dedrick Mills did not participate in practice, so we could watch out for Peyton Logan potentially to get the start here for Calgary. They also had 4 receivers who did not participate in practice, including both Reggie Begelton and Malik Henry, so Calgary could be the walking wounded coming into this one. The Argos dropped that aforementioned 34-27 decision in Hamilton last week against the Ticats. That moves their record to 4-4. They do still lead the East Division, but is now only by a single game, and that's over both Hamilton and Montreal. So the East Division definitely get tighter. The Argos not only lose the game, but they lose Andrew Harris for 4 to 6 weeks with a torn pec. Not good news. Now, I'm of the opinion that AJ Ouellette is the RB1 on this team moving forward. He had 13 touches of the football last week for 83 all-purpose yards. It's not an insane downgrade numbers-wise or tools-wise. AJ Ouellette, he's a little undersized like Andrew Harris is, but he's over 200 pounds. He can catch the ball. He can run the ball. He's good in all situations. So it feels to me like he should be the guy. However, they also have another guy on that running back depth chart who I believe was a top 20 pick from a couple of years ago. I don't have the proper pronunciation of his last name. I will look that up here in a second, but I'm seeing a lot of conversation about him potentially getting the start. It is entirely possible, so the starting running back position might be a little murky here in Toronto. Daniel Adebaboye, that's how you pronounce the name. He was the 15th overall pick to the Toronto Argos in the 2022 draft. They were looking for the best running back in the draft, and Adebaboye was the best running back in the draft, so he could very well pick up the start here. I'm kind of leaning on AJ Ouellette, as you saw kind of in my fantasy roster, but anything could happen here, so we'll definitely have to keep an eye on the depth chart to see what happens there. Look, I think there's a lot to be concerned about with this Toronto Argos team. I think once again, and I've kind of felt this way over the last 2 years, I don't think this team has an identity, or certainly I don't think has its identity right now. In both of those Hamilton games, Toronto was, I think, inarguably the second best team on the field, and they are now officially the most anemic offense in the CFL with only 11 offensive touchdowns on the season. That's not going to be good enough. You take a look at that West Division playoff picture, the Stampeders need to win their games against the East. They only have 3 of them left. That includes the game this week. They need to beat those East Division teams if they want any chance of potentially maybe catching BC to try to score a home playoff game. The West is also 16-4 this season against the East Division. I got to go with Calgary in this one. So am I on all 4 road teams this week? I think I am. Ottawa, Saskatchewan, and Montreal. Yeah, I'm on all 4 road teams this week. I got the Calgary Stampeders, despite the injury concerns, going into Toronto, getting the win over the Argos. Now, on the line, the Argos are taking 2.5 points here as a home underdog, a marginal one, against Calgary. I like Calgary to win. It's a relatively small price to pay. I'm going to go ahead and lay the -2.5 on the Stampeders. Total in the game set at 50 points. I think, like with the first game, like with Edmonton, Ottawa, I think the final scoring play of the game sends the total over on this one. So I think it's a pretty good number, but we're going to go over 50 points in Calgary, Toronto. Let's go Stamps 27, Argos 24. There you have it, folks. Those are your picks for Week 11 in the CFL in 2022. Let's go over them here with you one more time. I've got the Edmonton Elks going to Ottawa and upsetting the Ottawa REDBLACKS 27-23. I'm taking the +4.5 on Edmonton in a game that goes over 48.5. I got the BC Lions going to Saskatchewan and beating the Riders 34-23. Let's lay the 5 points on the BC Lions in a game that goes over 52.5. I got the Hamilton Ticats in Montreal upsetting the Montreal Alouettes 23-17. I'm going to be taking the 3 points with the Hamilton Ticats in a game that stays under 48.5. And the Calgary Stampeders go into Toronto and beating the Argos 27-24. I'm laying minus 2.5 on Calgary in a game that goes over 50. My heartfelt apologies to Daniel Adebaboye for needing to take like 5 minutes off camera there to find the proper pronunciation, or at least close to the proper pronunciation of his name. He has a couple of really cool highlight tapes on YouTube, honestly. If you want to just search his name, Daniel Adebaboye, he does some really cool highlight tapes on YouTube. That'll be worth taking a peek at, especially if he does wind up getting the start here for Toronto this week. That's it for me. Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at NerdTees. Thank you so much, as always, ladies and gentlemen, for taking the time to watch and play along with us in the comments section and have all kinds of fun. I love this league. I love doing this show. We will see you again next week for Week 12, and it's Daniel Adebaboye.